So I came to this issue. I'm here to speak about the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance, which is a group of 157 elected officials and tribal officials in the Pacific Northwest that have bonded together. But I just kind of want to talk, set the stage real quick, which is I got elected to office in Spokane, Washington in 2011. We're a town of 210,000 people. We have a river that runs right through our town, and taking the middle of our downtown is the rail line. And we're a town that was founded by the rail yard. We have minerals and agriculture. All of that is shipped out of Spokane. The actual largest industrial area in Spokane is called Hilliard, for Hills Rail Yard. That's what it's called. So we have a strong, rich history with the rail companies. And so in 2011, when I got elected, our river keeper walked up to me, which let's give river keepers a round of applause. We have so many of them here. And, listening to our river keepers and talking to them at my table earlier, they're doing a valuable, valuable service. And so I hadn't even taken the oath of office, and I was in a bar one night, and our river keeper walks up and goes, "I am so excited, and I have something to share with you." And he hands me a bag of coal. And he goes, "Do you want to go find more coal tomorrow?" And I'm like, I don't really know much about the coal issue, but let's go tomorrow. We woke up the next morning. We went down to the river in Spokane that the train trestles go over, and we walked along underneath the bridge, and each of us had a big bag of coal. The coal was coming off of those cars. And so that's kind of how I got attached to this issue. So we have a river that runs through the heart of our town. We have a rail yard that runs through the heart of our town. But we all have a shared concern for our economy, our safety, our environment. Right now, we have 2 coal trains a day that go through Spokane and 2 oil trains. We also have massive export facilities planned in western Washington. And the way the rail lines work is the Bakken oil comes from one line, the Powder River Basin coal comes from another line. They split off into about 4 lines as they go through Montana. And in Idaho, they all connect up into what's called a funnel. And then they go through Sandpoint, Idaho to Spokane, and then it divides into, I think, 4 different rail lines outside of Spokane. That funnel can only handle 78 trains a day. At peak harvest season, because Spokane is an agricultural on the eastern side of Washington, peak harvest season, you know how many agricultural trains we have a day? 78. We hit peak capacity from the agricultural product. It's our largest export. $1.8 billion worth of agricultural product comes out of the 7 counties in eastern Washington. Now, every single coal train and oil train, you sit with BNSF and they're like, yeah, it takes precedence. That's less agricultural product and economic development for our side of the state. And when you bring that up to them, they're like, well, they can just truck it. It's not a concern of theirs. There's a company in Washington state that is suing BNSF right now because they went out of business. They were a coal train company that took product, went out of business because the coal and the oil preempted them. And so when you go back to Washington, D.C., and I've gone a few times, and I guess the first story I want to tell is about meeting with Secretary of Transportation Fox when he was rule writing. And I went with a council member from Berkeley, California. I went with myself, a council member from Sandpoint, a council member from Albany. And we sit down and we're talking to him, and he's like, well, here's what you're up against. He goes, my first day in office, BNSF and Union Pacific just showed up and walked into our office. And he asked out front, he's like, well, what's going on? I don't have an appointment. Oh, there's an open door policy. The rail yards have an open door policy. You know how long it took for me to get an appointment with Transportation Secretary Fox? I don't have an open door policy with the federal government. But I think it's important to realize that and understand how we're going to combine, which is why this is so awesome. This is I haven't seen this big of a group about this very specific issue since I've been working on it in the last 4 years. So let's give ourselves a hand for our caring. So in 2012, I'm pretty liberal, but I had a conservative city council, and I convinced them to unanimously support a resolution on coal trains and that we needed to take some action. And BNSF showed up the day before, and all sorts of reasons why you can't come out as a city council. And a resolution it's a non-binding resolution, just saying we're concerned about the issue and we want our state and federal delegations to work on it. And so 6 months later, the election started for 3 of the council seats were up. And city council seats in Spokane, they're about $30,000, $40,000. And a PAC started out of nowhere. And you know who started that PAC against our candidates that supported me and that were on my side? BNSF. So then you look at the state level, and I'll just tell one more story and then I'll get into SELA. But these all inform my point of view and where I come from. And so the state started working on state law changes, and one of the senators held a hearing in Spokane, and it was supposed to be a big kickoff for our local senator. And so the hearing started, and we're like, well, there's going to be public testimony, and they'll tell us about the legislation. Well, they told us about 5 minutes about what the legislation did. They were very unclear why theirs was very different, very diluted version of oil train safety bill. And then the North Dakota petroleum industry had flown in and gave a 45-minute presentation on how safe Bakken crude was. And then BNSF got up and gave another half-an-hour presentation of how safe Bakken crude was traveling through our community. And then they said, well, we got 15 minutes left, now the public can talk. And that is how things work, and that's why we all need to stand together. And so now I'll kind of move after that. Oh, and just one more. In Seattle, on July 24th, 2014, there was a derailment carrying Bakken crude oil. It happened at 1:50 a.m., the train derails. At 3:11 a.m., BNSF notified the Washington Department of Ecology that there were no hazardous materials involved. 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., the Seattle Times posts an article to its website. The City of Seattle Emergency Response Office becomes aware of the incidents because they heard the news broadcast. At 6:54 a.m., a 911 call from area businesses alerts the Seattle Fire Department. SFD deploys 19 firefighters, including a hazardous materials team. At 7:30 a.m., the Department of Ecology learns that the train does contain hazardous material, Bakken crude oil. And you know who the hazmat information came from? The refinery, not Burlington Northern, because remember, they denied that it was hazardous at 3:11 a.m. And so it's just important as we move forward to understand that it's not all just emergency response. If your emergency responders are being told by the people carrying the product, then there's nothing your emergency responders can do. So SELA started as the Leadership for Alliance Against Coal. It's now the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance. It was formed in 2013, and we got initially within the first 6 months, it was started by Seattle Mayor Mike McGinn. We had 109 members, and it was the Leadership Alliance Against Coal. So it was sought to bring attention to the coal export terminals and seeks a thorough review of the impacts on safety, environment, traffic, and health. In 2014, it was reformed and rebranded with the leadership of King County Executive Dow Constantine. It was really set up, expanded scope so that we could encompass the growing threats by oil by rail. And so today, there are 5 states represented with 167 members, and British Columbia is a member. We have 4 meetings every year. We've had meetings in Olympia, Portland, Spokane, Tacoma, Vancouver, and in Seattle. And everybody's united. These 167 people sit around and talk about public health and safety, economic impacts, environmental protection, treaty rights. There are 6 tribes that are a member of SELA, and full disclosure of your impacts at a regional level. So instead of the Spokane City Council acting and passing a resolution and sending it on to our regulators or sending it on to the governor, when we send a letter, everybody gets an email and says, this is the letter we're sending out. And this happens about probably every 2 weeks. We're sending out different dialogue to different regulatory agencies and different elected officials. And then you're allowed to sign on. I think the largest letter we've had was signed by 89 different members of the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance. And so then when I go to Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting with Transportation Secretary Fox, I'm not just representing the citizens of Spokane. I say I'm representing SELA, and I give him a list of all of the members of SELA. And he lights up on that because Secretary of Transportation Fox, he's a former mayor, and he understands how we regionally act, and he sees some of the problems. We have worked on state legislation in Washington and Oregon to strengthen disclosure, inspections, and preparedness, joint comment letters, and by us all acting together, we make a stronger case for it. So what do we have? We have a Facebook page. We have a website, which is kingcounty.gov/CELA. We have brochures that we take with us. And then we do joint research and sign-on letters. And the King County office has been great. They've assigned a full-time staff person to it. What she did was prepare this PowerPoint that I'm not able to show you. But joint media, when Dow comes over to Spokane for a rally or a media event, him and I can go out to different media stations, or when I go to Seattle, or when he goes to Vancouver, wherever we travel throughout the state, then we all act in concert together. We've had joint meetings with the governor, introduction and the adoption of oil transport safety legislation in Washington and Oregon. I think we saw earlier that Washington is moving in the right direction with their legislation, but I was still pretty disappointed about the disclosure in the legislation itself. Strong media coverage. Washington Senator, so Senator Cantwell, when she introduced her oil train safety bill, the first thing she did was flew to Spokane to announce it, and then went immediately to Seattle that afternoon for her second press conference. But we surrounded her with leaders from CELA that came from all over the region and then acted in concert with her. So CELA can be a resource for anybody here because it's not limited. This issue is not limited to the Pacific Northwest. It's kingcounty.gov/CELA, SELA. And if you have any questions, you can send an email to CELA@kingcounty.gov. Thank you very much for having me today.